Today I'm going to talk about doing a simple painting using 3 colors and 2 brushes. I'm using a number 10 round, and I'm also using a 1/2 inch flat, and we're going to paint a pear. Everybody loves pears, well, for the most part. And we're going to use 3 colors, alizarin crimson, we're going to use lemon yellow, and we're going to use ultramarine blue, and just 2 brushes. I already put paint in my palette. It's a little damp because in addition to wetting down all the wells where the paint is, I also throw some paint on my palette. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But I'm going to be using this lemon yellow, this ultramarine blue, and this alizarin crimson. I have other colors that I use on my palette, but I'm going to focus on just doing this with 3 colors. And I'm going to put that back there for now. And I'm going to start with, I think, with the number 10 brush. And the trick here is to either mix the colors on the paper or mix them on a palette. I like to mix on the paper. All right, so I am just wetting this area. Pears primarily are yellow. Some of them are kind of a rust color, but we're going to work with a yellow pear. And I'm not putting paint all over this area. I'm moistening, not necessarily wetting the paper, but moistening the paper. And I'm going to go ahead and just put some lemon yellow on this area here. I'm going to pretend my light's coming this way, which I guess actually it is. Now remember, the paper's moistened. I'm working around that stem. And let's see, we can take this lemon yellow and we can also mix in some alizarin crimson to get an orange. Now, watercolor is unpredictable. We got some drips here. Unpredictable. You never know exactly what's going to happen. Let's whip that out with some tissue. Here we go. And this is unedited, and you're watching my pain. Not my pain, but my challenges of working with watercolor. I've got more lemon yellow I want to put in here. And I paint very loose. For some of you, it may be kind of scary when you're first starting out. We all have a tendency of wanting to be precise, wanting to make all our work look exactly like the picture or the frame of reference, which is great, but kind of crippling after a while. You're not taking advantage of your artistic vision, and everybody has an artistic vision. Whether you're copying somebody else's work or doing your own, we all have a way we see and interpret things. Now what I'm doing here is just adding more alizarin crimson to kind of an orangey mix, maybe deepening the color down here. And that is the start, my initial washes on this. I'm trying to work around the stems. I also have some stuff that leaked out there. I'm going to take a tissue and just grab these beaded wet colors down here. Now, let's see, I might want to throw some blue into this mix, which will put some green in my pear. And this is really an abstract pear. Notice I don't have any point of reference. I paint like that a lot. I don't really do a point of reference when I'm doing simple studies like this. My studies tend to be more complicated. Then I will have a point of reference. I will do sketches, I'll do value sketches, but right now this is just from the top of my mind, from all the pears I've seen in my life. And there have been a lot of pears. I just took some alizarin crimson and I threw it into my green mixture just to see what's going to happen. Now, I may get blossoms on this, which are those funny little things that happen when you put drops of water in your watercolor paint that hasn't already dried. So we don't know what's going to happen precisely, but I'm starting to get a different color palette, and it's just using 3 colors. I threw some ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson and yellow to make almost a brown. So another way that we can lift these beads is by just drying my brush on my tissue and taking a thirsty dry brush and letting it lift those beads of color. What are we going to do with this? We'll kind of lift that too. Not going to worry about that too much. So I have my initial washes down of lemon yellow, alizarin crimson. Then I took the lemon yellow and mixed a dull green by using some ultramarine blue. And then I mixed all those colors together to get a brown. I'm going to let this first wash dry, and then we'll move on to adding some color on these leaves and stems. The first wash has dried a little bit, and I see some things here I don't like. This is a little tricky, this correction. I kind of lifted and gently feathered in some of the color, but we're going to not worry about that. We're going to put some shadows there anyway. And I have a little bit of stuff here. I'm just taking a brush that has water on it and carefully wetting the area where I have color that I don't want. And you should do this after your paint has dried. Not while it's wet, because you'll compromise and lift the color you just put down there and spread it around, and it's not a pretty situation. I see a little bit up here also. I don't want to mess with it too much, because then I'm afraid I'm going to get into the color that I already put down. I've got some leaves I want to work on, so let's work on the leaf on the top. I mixed some ultramarine blue and some lemon yellow, and my paper is dry right now, and I'm just putting color down, lemon yellow and ultramarine blue and a light green, and then a darker green towards the bottom of the leaf. Hopefully you can see this. And I'm just letting the colors mix on the paper. I like the division of the light green and the dark green there. I'm going to mix some more color up, and I'm going to start again with this color mixture here. It's a little bit more stylized, but I kind of like it. And you paint what you like. Again, a mixture of lemon yellow and ultramarine blue on dry paper. And then I take the darker mixture of ultramarine blue and lemon yellow and put it on the bottom of the leaf. And I kind of let them mix together. I just took a damp brush and I took the paint off. Maybe throw a bit more lemon yellow in there. See how it's mixing? And you might have these beads. You don't like these beads? Take a thirsty brush, a dry brush, and lift them. And stems, what color are stems? Well, I'm going to test my color here. I might want to make it a little darker. I put some ultramarine blue in a mixture of lemon yellow, alizarin crimson. Let me show you. Lemon yellow, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue, and I'll mix them up together, and you kind of get a brown. You'll get some nice darks. So I'm going to use that nice dark for my stem. I'm going to make it darker on the bottom, following the outline that I did with pencil. And remember, nothing has to be precise. As a matter of fact, it looks a whole lot better when it's not. Now I'm going to take a brush that just has water on it, and I'm going to pull that color up and let it mix on the paper. So I'm not letting it mix so much on the palette. I made the color on the palette, but I'm letting it mix on the paper. And I might not like that 100%. Maybe it's not enough color for me. I want to go slowly with my first washes and then build on them. I can see here, I don't particularly like how that's dripping. The perils of watercolor. You never know exactly what's going to happen. I'll just darken that up a little bit. And let's continue with the stems of the leaves. Let's make those, let's make them a dark green. And that's ultramarine blue and lemon yellow to do these stems of the leaves here. Okay. And I'm just going to lightly dab it on here. Still using that number 10 brush. Maybe a little thicker than I would like, but for the purpose of this demonstration, perfectly acceptable. I have a leaf down here. Then we're going to go ahead and do the same thing with the leaf down there that we did on the leaves on the top. We're going to do a light spring green, and I think I'm going to approach the lighter color from this side. And again, my paper is dry right now. I tend to work very dry. I do not particularly like those drips that happen. Some artists work differently. I prefer to let the paint moisten sometimes on the paper and let it do its thing without me doing a whole lot of work, because we're all busy. All right, and then I'm going to, I don't know if I like that dark right there. I'm going to have build on this just a little bit. And these are, again, our initial washes. I have a little stem here. I'm going to just dot that in there. Again, using the number 10 brush. And there's a twig or something on this side, so I can go in and take that mix of ultramarine blue, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and lemon yellow. That makes kind of a dark brown. And I can go ahead and put that mix in there, gently working around the sketch of my pear and bringing it out like that. Might be a little too soon on that because I was going to put a surface area here. So I may regret doing what I did, but we'll figure it out together. So that's the step of adding the leaves, 3 colors, lemon yellow and ultramarine blue, and stem, lemon yellow, ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson. And yes, you have to really practice painting and working on those color mixes. It's not going to come right away. So you can make little swatches and test your colors as you're mixing them on a scrap piece of watercolor paper. I use this a lot. So that's where we are at this point. I think once this dries, I'm going to try and do a background, maybe of a kind of a bluish yellow, or maybe just ultramarine blue, make it kind of a blue sky situation. But once this dries, I can go ahead and work on that. I'm going to switch to a 1/2 inch flat right now, which I've moistened. My initial washes are primarily dry right now, and I'm going to work around my sketches and my painting here of the leaves and stems and the pear shape itself. I'm not too worried about getting these things wet with paint. I'm moistening the paper lightly, and I'm remembering to see how I'm doing this. I'm working around these stems and leaves and twigs because I don't want to put the light blue paint in there that I'm going to throw up here. So I'm just moistening around these areas. I'm going to be using one color, pretty much, ultramarine blue, and I may get creative and throw a little bit of alizarin crimson in there, give us a little bit of a purple. Now I am moistening this again, and I might have a little bit too much. If I see I have too much wet, I just take a tissue and lift it. And you can tell, and I'm not going to lift this, but a little tip, you can tell if your paper's moistened and wet if you hold it up to the light in certain conditions, and you can see a sheen, and that means that your paper is damp. Just a little tip. Okay, I just moisten that, and then I'm just going to take some ultramarine blue, and I like very diffuse skies, very diffuse backgrounds. I don't always like them extremely intense in color, although this one's looking a little intense. But for the purpose of this study, that's perfectly a-okay. And we're just pulling this paint down, still using a 1/2 inch brush. It would have been probably smarter for me to use a larger flat than this 1/2 inch flat. But sometimes the joy of painting takes over the logic of the work, and I end up going, oh, I shoulda, but maybe that's not so bad. And you got to excuse me if my head gets in the way. Trying to keep it out of there as much as I can. You can see I'm just putting down ultramarine blue with a damp brush, working around these other areas that I've already painted. You can see me going back and forth to a tissue when I feel it's too wet and drippy. All of this takes practice. A lot of people in my classes come in and go, but it's not working. Well, you just did it for 2 minutes. It takes practice to know how to put down something and not mix the colors together. It takes patience to not put the colors in when the paint is wet and then you have a situation that you don't like. I'm not saying that's the fun part, but sometimes it's better to pause to have an idea of slow painting, although I'm working pretty fast here. Okay, I'm just outlining the area around the pear, trying not to get into the pear, doing it, sneaking in here on this tabletop, but that's okay, we can work with that. Little beading there, and I'm just going to be brave, and I'm going to throw in some ultramarine blue with a little bit of alizarin crimson. What does that give us? It gives us a purple, but it gives it a little bit more variety. Part of the fun of painting is the variety and the magic that happens when you take a chance and you least expect it, and you let the paper, the water, and the paint do the work. And that takes confidence. I can just put in some random brush strokes. I'm not concerned about this being perfect. I'm not concerned about this being precise. Part of the reason is I don't really have a frame of reference. I'm just putting paint down. And that kind of frees you up. I always like the diffuse backgrounds that you see in portrait paintings. And I try to bring that kind of a feel to a lot of my still lifes and artwork, that diffusion. And working around this area. I don't know what's going to happen with this purple, but I'm going to stop here. So I just put some alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue together on my palette. Let me show you right there after I laid in the ultramarine blue. And again, it's a diffuse background. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can see I'm making a little adjustments here and there. That gives me a background for the pear there. And do we want to go ahead and work on the tabletop? I think I'm going to let this dry and then come back to the tabletop. But while this is drying, I'm going to explore putting a little bit of green in this area here. And how do you put color over watercolor? A lot of my students ask me that. I dampen the area, a little bit too much dampening there. And dampen the area where I want to put the color lightly. It's kind of a get in, get out type of thing. I'm putting a mixture of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson in here. And a little bit more blue might be good. You can get more of a green effect. I'm putting that in. And what I'm going to do is bring that down here. And you can see my brush is pretty dry. I'm still using that 1/2 inch. That noise you hear are my glass containers. I am not clinking a cocktail, which is almost regretful. I tried painting after having a glass of wine, and just for me it doesn't work. I have to be focused on this. I put some yellow and some ultramarine blue to maybe put some green in there. I'm going to dab in some more of that mixture, and I'm just letting it mix on the paper. And then I'm going to take a little bit more of my orange mixture, which is alizarin crimson and lemon yellow, and I'm going to bring it out here like that, and I'm going to let it mingle and mix and blend on the paper with some of that wet greenish yellow I just put in, just to see what happens. And again, using 3 colors, 2 brushes. And on this side, I'm going to take that mixture of lemon yellow and alizarin crimson, and I've made kind of an orange, and same basic deal. We're going to bring that in there, letting it mix somewhere along the line with that greenish yellow I put in. Maybe intensify it a little bit, I don't know. Again, I apologize if my head gets in the way, but I am doing this by myself, so I can't really see where my head goes. I just set the camera up and hope for the best. And maybe, let's just say maybe, we can put some more darker brown here. And I work this pretty dry. My brush is damp, my paper is dry, but I put it in and I then let these damp colors mingle on the paper. And let's get really wild. Well, for this, and put some purple down here for the darker side of the pear. And I have a feeling I'm going to get a lot of blossoms. See how this is dripping? I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to just let it do its thing and see where it goes. A couple of things I wanted to point out. This is a result of me putting in the additional washes while I was putting that purple down. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to kind of move it around with a damp brush. And we'll put some more color in there. The paper is not wet. The paper is dry right now. And I'm taking a mix of alizarin crimson and lemon yellow. And I'm just making a little bit of correcting here. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Paper is dry. Brush is barely wet. Just enough to pick the watercolor and some water up. And I'm just manipulating it lightly. Sometimes these things happen. They're not the end of the world. And again, excuse my head and my hair. Whoops. See? I'm working on cheaper paper, which I find is great. I shouldn't say cheaper, I should say less expensive. And I like it. However, it sometimes is a little difficult to work with because it doesn't have the same properties as, say, a more expensive paper. The color doesn't stick to it as well, doesn't sink into the weave of the paper. It tends to rust on top, which is fine. It also keeps me from overworking things. Still working, by the way, with that 1/2-inch brush. And as you can see, I had a little bit of drippy here. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go in right now and hope I won't ruin that pear. But I'm putting in a mixture of ultramarine blue, lemon yellow, and alizarin crimson. And as you can see, it's almost a taupe, a gray, a black. And I'm putting it in with a damp brush, working around the stem. Too damp for my taste. I like it a little drier. And just adding that mixture. It's going to vary. That's the way I paint. I am not precise. When I work with oils, I tend to be more precise. When I work with acrylics, I tend to be more precise. When I work with watercolor, I just love the immediacy and the mystery of what's going to happen. And that's a lot for me because I'm pretty much a control person. Here you might see some blossoms occurring. That's when you put water, I have found. I don't know if this is the right definition, but if I put water in with some paint that hasn't dried already, it'll cause a blossom. Blossoms don't bother me so much. I'm not going to get worried about blossoms. And I'm going to add some of this really dark mixture. I'm going to go ahead and dilute it with water. Remember, with watercolor, the more water you put in, the less intense your color is going to be. And all these little things that you have to remember. But you know, it's a challenge to paint. It stretches you. It stretches your mind. It stretches your problem solving. I have a lot of students that are older, well past 40 and 50. Some of them going into their 90s. And they do paint a lot, and it keeps them young and it keeps their mental functions going, because everything you do when you paint or do any creative work is problem solving. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here, but not too much. You know why I'm not going to touch that now? Because my paint is wet and I'm going to run into problems. So instead of touching that, I'm going to do some light washes. I like to leave dots of white in. I call it sparkle. But I might want to just take, and this paint is dry, just do a little bit more brushwork here and there. Now I may have just ruined it. We'll see. Add a little bit. How do you add texture with watercolor? Dry brush, dry brush. Don't worry about it. This is again where you have to be brave. Many times I am not brave. I'm scared. And I've been doing this for well over 30 years. I'm just adding a little bit of texture with a dry brush on top of the washes that we've already put down. Don't know if I like it. And if I don't feel I like it, I can take some of it off with a tissue. I always have a tissue in my hands. Oops, sorry about that noise. I always have a tissue in my hands because I like to put stuff down and take it up when I'm not sure. Maybe wet this a little bit to get the lifting process. And yes, my paper is buckling. Yes, I don't like it. If I was using more expensive paper, I don't think we'd have that problem. And I'm going to continue to let this dry down here, this tabletop, and I'm going to go back to my number 10, and I'm just going to put in some more intense color on these leaves. And I have to be honest with you, I don't particularly like the green mixture of lemon yellow. I use an aureolin yellow a lot of times. I don't know why, it just doesn't, this does not pop for me. I like my colors brighter, but it'll work. I'm putting the additional washes on with a damp brush with very little water in the brush over dry paper, and just letting the colors mix from the moisture of the brush and the paint. And just intensifying some of those colors a little bit. Some lemon yellow here, and intensifying that green down there. Maybe the stems, I don't know. I like to keep my stems variable. I don't like to put every single stem line in there. Excuse me. All right, how about we darken this little guy here just a bit. Too much water. I'm trying to keep almost a shape to it, thinking that the light's coming from here, so the bottom of it's going to be darker. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that effect or not. And notice I'm just dabbing that in there. We're almost done with this. I don't know if I want to do any more on it. I wanted to keep it kind of obscure and abstract, bright, colorful, a little bit more stylized. This is still a little wet. I'm going to take a chance right now. You can see me do that on the side. I am not one for splattering. And I'm trying to aim just on the pear, and I'm lifting some of that splatter. If I lift too much, that causes a problem. Watercolor will dry 20% lighter after you put it down. All right. A little splatter here and there. Maybe a little splatter of that lemon yellow and alizarin crimson here and there. I'm kind of hesitant to go too much with it. probably don't have enough water. And yeah, you can use your finger, just don't put your finger in your mouth afterwards. Not a wise thing to do. Trying to aim for the pear. Aim for the pear. We'll see. Maybe just, how about some purple down on these darker areas of splatter. And I'll try it here. You can see it's sort of working. I've oversplattered before and it's kind of scary. You can do that. Mix it up with your finger. Okay. This is feeling like it's pretty dry down here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some shadow down. And I'm going to put the shadow to match the purple that I've got here. Every object has shadow when you're doing a still life. It'll be a cast shadow from the object. It'll be shadows from other things coming through. I'm just going to like anchor this little pear here with a bit of shadow underneath. If we don't put shadow down, things look like they're floating. And again, this is a number 10, and it's a mixture of alizarin crimson and ultramarine blue. And I'm putting it down with this paper on dry paper. I'm even going to extend it over here. I don't know what's going to happen. I'm hoping with my years of experience, which sometimes don't feel like any when I do this, we're going to get some decent results. Then I'm going to pull out the color with a damp brush to the end of our table here. One of my students calls it feathering, which I thought was a great term. I have a feeling I'm going to have blossoms. Do I care? Not particularly at this point. I'll maybe add a little bit more, which will guarantee blossoms. And you can see I put the color down and it's lifting, which is not the effect I wanted. And probably if I had wet the paper like I supposed to, I wouldn't have had this problem. But such is life. And I'm going to take this, also this brush with this purple, and maybe outline a few things here and there. Because that purple makes nice shadows. I use a lot of purple in my shadows. And I might, just to keep harmony in color, put a little bit of purple here. Not too much, and I'm already regretting doing some of this. Maybe tissue it. Hey, that's why we have tissues. And tissue the bottom here if I can get some of it off. Tissues also add nice texture, as you can probably see there and there. Tissue randomly gives it depth. Nothing is a solid. How is this looking? Let's lightly tissue some of these dots so they're not looking at us and yelling at us. All right, we are almost done here. My pear looks a little lost, but I'm hesitant to do too much else with it. What I am going to do is take, hey, a number 2 pencil. I'm not picking on my pencils. They say Dixon Ticonderoga is the best. It is, but I get whatever I can find inexpensive because I go through stuff so quickly. Let's see, let's start on this side, and I'm going to just do a light pencil outline and light. And I regret this paper buckled, but I have ways to flatten them. Some of them include ironing. I'm not going to tell you how I did that because I don't think that's the right thing to do, ironing your paper. Doing this, you really, and I'm pushing it here, you really need to make sure that your paper is dry because the pencil's not going to show up, and it barely shows up now. I think that's pretty much done. I think the last thing I'm going to do, pardon me for that noise, is just throw a signature down here. And that's my pair. And I'm going to show you my palette now, which is kind of a mess, and try to explain some of these washes. This is, and you can see it's still moving around, lemon yellow and alizarin crimson for, I'm sorry, lemon yellow and ultramarine blue. Lemon yellow, ultramarine blue for the green, alizarin crimson and lemon yellow for oranges and warm colors. Then I took ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson to make purples, and then I mixed all of them, ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, and lemon yellow, to make browns and dark colors. So there is your pair, or my pair, that I've done with 3 colors and 2 brushes, a number 10 round and a 1/2 inch watercolor brush. This is on 140-pound cold press paper, and a good budget brand paper that's great for just practice like this. And this goes to show you, you can pretty much create any painting, any color, using just 3 colors. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate it. And remember to always keep practicing.